that almost nobody is stopping to unpack. So let's start with the basic structure of the deal, because the structure matters far more than the headline. Eala isn't simply doing a one-off appearance or collecting a fee for a single photo shoot. She's been positioned as the face of Marriott Bonvoy's Asia-Pacific edition of its Tennis the World campaign, which is a full marketing program, not just one social media post. Campaigns run on calendars. They involve content commitments, regional media appearances, usage rights across multiple markets, and potentially a relationship that extends well beyond a single tournament. That's fundamentally different from the frantic 6-week period after Raducanu's 2021 US Open breakthrough, when brands such as Tiffany, Dior, British Airways, Evian, and Vodafone were all moving quickly to secure pieces of her time and attention before she had even played a full season as a Grand Slam champion. And here's the detail I keep coming back to, because it completely reframes the story. Marriott Bonvoy isn't simply some random travel company trying to attach itself to a hot young tennis player. Marriott has an established relationship with major tennis, including the Australian Open. Read that twice, because that context matters. This isn't a company parachuting in to buy attention during a hype window and then disappearing once the news cycle moves on. It's a brand that already has a structural seat at one of the 4 biggest events in the sport, now extending that relationship to an athlete it expects will still matter when January arrives. That's not pure opportunism. That's infrastructure. And it tells you something about how Eala's team is approaching this moment that all the next Raducanu comparisons completely miss, because the real risk with Raducanu was never that she signed sponsors. Every young star does. The risk was the sequencing. She went from an unseeded qualifier to Grand Slam champion in a matter of weeks, then tried to build a massive commercial portfolio and a full-time tennis career simultaneously, without an established baseline of results to fall back on if either side began to wobble. When her ranking dropped, the obligations didn't. That's the trap. Eala's situation is structurally different, even if the speed of the headlines makes it look similar. She already has a WTA title. She already has major wins over elite opponents. The Marriott deal is being added on top of an existing competitive foundation rather than being used to substitute for one. I also think there's a part of this story that has almost nothing to do with rankings and everything to do with geography. The Philippines has never had a sustained top-tier WTA singles presence at this level, which means Eala isn't simply an exciting young player to a brand's marketing department. She's a market-opening event. Southeast Asian sports sponsorship has historically been dominated by football and basketball, while tennis has often been treated as a European and American product delivered through international broadcasts. But a homegrown player capable of making deep Grand Slam runs changes that equation completely, because now there is a face, a flag, and a passionate fan base that previously had very few reasons to organize around one player. Marriott's messaging leaned directly into that connection, highlighting Eala's relationship with Southeast Asia as part of the appeal rather than treating it as empty promotional language. That's a brand explicitly pricing in reach, something a simple ranking-based valuation model could never fully capture. So here's where I have to pause and flip the frame on myself, because up to this point I've basically been making the bullish case for how well this is being handled. I don't think that's the whole picture, and I'd be doing you a disservice if I pretended it was. The uncomfortable variable nobody is talking about is timing risk, and it has less to do with how the deal is structured than with what happens if the results don't continue at the same pace. Marriott signed the version of Eala that exists in August. Fresh off Wimbledon, fresh off her maiden WTA title, and playing in sold-out night sessions in Toronto. Sponsorship valuations are often locked in when visibility is at its peak. If Eala's ranking continues climbing from here, this deal could look like a bargain for Marriott within a year. But if her ranking plateaus, or if the demanding WTA schedule catches up with her the way it eventually does with almost every young player experiencing a full tour calendar for the first time, the conversation changes quickly. Not because the deal itself was necessarily a mistake, but because the market was pricing momentum, and momentum is arguably the least stable variable in professional sport. That's actually the more useful comparison to Raducanu, and it has nothing to do with greed or overreach. It's about volatility. Raducanu's commercial value was priced at the absolute peak of a 2-week miracle run, meaning every deal signed during that window was effectively betting that an extraordinary level of visibility and performance could be sustained. Very few 18-year-olds maintain that immediately. Eala's window is different. Hers has lasted weeks rather than days and has been built across multiple tournaments instead of one extraordinary fortnight. But it's still a window, and the people managing her career understand that better than anyone watching from the outside. What I find genuinely smart about this first deal is the category Marriott occupies. Hotels are about as brand safe and broadly appealing as sponsorship categories get. There are no obvious performance clauses tied to winning a particular tournament, and typically there is little direct conflict with existing racket, apparel, or equipment partnerships because those occupy completely different sponsorship lanes. It's the kind of first major partnership that can establish a clean commercial identity before the higher stakes categories arrive, where valuations become much more sensitive to weekly ranking movements. Racket and apparel contracts, for example, can be negotiated around cycles that are directly influenced by performance, visibility, and results, while a hotel loyalty partnership can build a much broader lifestyle identity. And that brings me to the part of this story I find most interesting, because I think it may be the most predictive detail of all. Marriott didn't simply select Eala at random for an Asia-Pacific campaign. The regional focus matters. It suggests the partnership was designed around a specific growth opportunity rather than as the first step toward a blanket global campaign. Watch what happens next in Eala's sponsorship market, because regional positioning is often the first domino rather than the last. Once one major brand demonstrates that there is a genuine commercial opportunity in a growing Southeast Asian tennis audience, other companies have an incentive to follow. Marriott, with its established Australian Open presence and global reach, is a particularly credible first mover. My expectation is that the next major deal won't come from another hotel chain, obviously, but from a footwear or apparel brand looking to target that same regional opportunity, potentially around the US Open window. While Eala's visibility is still compounding, that if that happens within the next month, you'll know this wasn't a one-off cash-in at all. It was the opening move in a deliberately built commercial identity, and Marriott simply happened to be the brand smart enough, or fast enough, to get there first. I want to push that regional carve-out point one step further, because there's a number that makes the whole thing click into place for me. Marriott operates roughly 30 hotel brands across thousands of properties worldwide. So when a company of that scale chooses to build a campaign around one specific athlete for one specific region, that's not a marketing intern's idea getting approved on a whim. It requires budget approval, legal review, multi-country activation planning, and coordination across multiple markets. Deals like that are typically developed well before the public announcement, which means someone inside Marriott was evaluating Eala's trajectory before she had even finished her run in Washington. They weren't simply reacting to Wimbledon. They were watching the momentum building underneath it. And that's the detail that separates calculated brand building from pure hype chasing. A company reacting to a viral moment signs quickly and signs shallow, often with a single appearance fee or short-term campaign that disappears once the attention moves on. A company making a long-term regional bet does the opposite. Slower paperwork, deeper integration, and a campaign platform that already exists across other markets and other athletes. Tennis the World wasn't created specifically for Eala. She's being plugged into an established property, which tells you her name is being added to an existing piece of infrastructure rather than the entire strategy being built around one